all women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public, because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children, men will die for their wives and children, and God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts. The trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy, and the transcendentals, the good, true, and beautiful. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. Feminismus delendis 8. Ersatz Elite. How Cultural Marxists Faked Civilization, written by Conrad Riker. Available now. Links in description. The Empowered Plantation. Exposing the Ersatz Elites for liberation, the biological extortion of the 900 handbag shit test, and why the invisible male atlas must withdraw consent from the feminist flesh market. Look at the degenerate circus surrounding you and realize the architects of this illusion are charging you for the tickets. The high priests of cultural Marxism have performed a terminal equivocation on the very concept of freedom. The word liberation derives from the Latin liber, meaning free, implying a release from bondage. Yet their crowning achievement, sex work is work, commodifies the female body into mercs, the Latin root for merchandise. You cannot purchase the sacred and call it emancipation. We have built a modern Babylon that calls a digital pimp on OnlyFans an empowered entrepreneur, while branding the men who engineered the smartphone she uses as toxic oppressors. This is not civilization, it is a neurological hallucination enforced by an ersatz elite who profit from your compliance. They conjure absurd academic theories like the Plantationocene to frame Western agricultural and industrial revolutions as pure extractive evil. This is textbook psychological projection. The true plantation is the modern gynocentric welfare state. Consider the irrefutable logic. Slavery is the uncompensated extraction of one class's labor for the benefit of another. Men are the only net lifetime taxpayers. The state appropriates our surplus labor to fund the autonomous choices of women. Conclusion: the modern bureaucratic state functions as a fiscal plantation, with men cast as the indentured servants. This systemic theft bleeds into your daily life, disguised as romantic expectation. She gets playfully aggressive, pushing your boundaries to see if you possess the steel to push back, or she demands a 900 handbag because she genuinely needs it. By the strict grammar of natural law, a need is that which is required for biological survival. A luxury handbag is a shit test, a biological probe for your strength. If you yield to this extortion, you fail. You commit treason against your own biological telos. The feminist establishment demands you provide the rugged, sacrificial labor of a patriarch, while treating you with the due process of a medieval serf. They have convinced blue-pilled men that their value lies solely in their utility as walking ATMs. A man's value is inherent, rooted in his capacity for reason, production, and creation. You are the architect, not the extraction point. Meanwhile, the cultural overseers weep over the manufactured myth of the female emotional burden, completely ignoring the invisible atlas holding up the sky. They complain about the exhaustion of choosing dinner recipes, while men constitute 93% of workplace fatalities and 100% of combat deaths. They mock male stoicism, entirely blind to the fact that your silent sacrifice is the scaffolding holding up their entire comfortable existence. Male love is not found in endless, grating verbal validation. It is a verb. It is the oil change at midnight, the 60-hour work week, the silent bearing of the crushing weight of reality so that society may live in comfort. A society that pathologizes competence and celebrates weakness is ripe for collapse. We are going to systematically dismantle this matrix of lies. We will expose the flesh market, master the tyranny of female needs, and lay the architectural foundations for a new Iron Age. The flesh market and the false idol of liberation. Consider the Latin: liber, free, unrestricted, unbound, the root of liberation, liberty, liberal. To be liber meant to be a free man, a citizen of the Republic, one who stood in the forum and spoke his mind without a master's hand upon his shoulder. Now watch what the cultural Marxists have done to the word. They have taken liber and nailed it to a commodified corpse, parading the rotting thing through the streets as sexual liberation. The contemporary feminist triumph, the normalization of digital prostitution, under the cheerful banner of sex work is work, represents the terminal equivocation of our age. Merx, the Latin root of merchant and merchandise, gives us market, the flesh market. When you define the total commodification of the human person as freedom, you have not liberated anyone. You have simply erected a new shop window and called the pimp a platform developer. I want you to perform a simple exercise in formal logic, because the truth does not require your belief, it requires only your attention. Major premise: slavery is the uncompensated extraction of one class's labor for the benefit of another class. Minor premise: men are the only demographic in Western civilization who are net lifetime taxpayers, funding a state apparatus that disproportionately redistributes that wealth towards social programs primarily utilized by women. Conclusion: the modern bureaucratic state functions as a fiscal plantation, with productive men as the indentured class. This syllogism is sound. The premises are empirically verifiable. The conclusion follows necessarily. You may not like it. You may feel a sudden urge to scroll past, to dismiss this as extremism, to reach for the thought-terminating cliches that were implanted in your mind by the very system I am describing. But you cannot refute it, because it is true. The irony would be hilarious if it were not so catastrophic. Leftist academics, those tenured parasites who have never produced a single tangible good in their entire existence, have conjured a magnificent term, the Plantationocene. They use it to frame Western civilization's agricultural and industrial revolutions as pure, extractive evil, as though the plow and the steam engine were instruments of original sin. This is textbook psychological projection. The true plantation is the modern gynocentric welfare state. The true extraction is the tax code that seizes the surplus labor of men who lay bricks, weld steel, repair transformers, and patrol dangerous streets, then hands that sweat equity to a bureaucracy that funds the autonomous choices of women who have been taught to regard male provision as a human right. The plantation master does not wear a white suit. The plantation master wears a pantsuit or a gender studies professor's tweed or an HR director's lanyard. Now consider the biological reality that the entire cultural Marxist project exists to deny. Women possess what evolutionary psychologists have documented as a dual mating strategy: the drive to obtain high-quality genetic material from dominant, sexually appealing men, the so-called alpha seed, while simultaneously securing long-term provision and protection from dependable, resource-rich men, the beta need. This is not a moral judgment. This is a behavioral adaptation as old as the species itself, observable across cultures and documented in the anthropological record. The sexual revolution did not eliminate this strategy, it removed all the guardrails. By destroying the institution of marriage as a binding contract, by making divorce unilaterally available at a woman's whim, by rewarding paternity fraud, by treating the family court as a wealth transfer mechanism. Feminism did not free women. It freed hypergamy. It reduced the mating market to a short-term flesh bazaar where the top 10% of men enjoy sexual access to the majority of women, while the remaining 90% are expected to fund the entire apparatus through taxation and social compliance. The Kafkaesque framing that sustains this grotesque system is itself a masterclass in unfalsifiable reasoning. Watch how it operates. If a woman chooses to sell photographs of her body on the internet, she is empowered. If she is exploited by the platform, that takes a 30% cut of her revenue, she is a victim of the patriarchy. If a woman enters a corporate career and rises to the top, she has shattered the glass ceiling. If she fails to rise, she has been held back by systemic bias. In neither case is the woman ever held accountable for her own agency. She is simultaneously an all-powerful, independent, self-owning queen and a helpless, fragile child who requires state intervention to survive. This is not equality. This is the adult infantilization of half the human race, dressed up in the language of liberation. Consider the case of the modern online performer. Here is a young woman, 23 years old. No particular skill, no trade, no apprenticeship completed, no mastery ladder climbed. She opens an account on a platform that allows her to sell explicit material directly to subscribers. She calls this financial independence. She calls this entrepreneurship. But where does the money come from? It comes from men. It comes from the surplus capital generated by men who work in the productive economy. Men who mine the lithium for her iPhone, men who lay the fiber optic cables that transmit her photographs, men who maintain the electrical grid that powers the servers hosting her business. She produces nothing, she builds nothing, she creates nothing of lasting value. She merely extracts, and the culture calls her brave. The red-pilled man sees this situation with perfect clarity, and he makes a decision that terrifies the Ersatz Elite. He withdraws his consent. He refuses to participate in his own exploitation. He closes his wallet to the unvetted demands of the empowered. He redirects his capital, his time, his energy, his money, his attention toward his own mastery, his own sovereignty, and the construction of parallel institutions that honor the traditions of the West. He does not beg. He does not complain. He does not vote for politicians who promise to fix it. He simply stops feeding the beast, and the beast screams. True liberation, the liberation worth fighting for, aligns with the good, the true, and the beautiful. It does not align with the appetitive. It does not align with the demands of the flesh market. The restoration of Western civilization requires the categorical rejection of this market. Men must withhold their provision from a system that treats their labor as a right and their masculinity as a crime. They must rebuild the institutions that feminist and Marxist ideology has destroyed. The family governed by a father's authority, the guild organized by the apprenticeship mastery ladder, the community ordered by subsidiarity, the republic restrained by natural law. This is not a return to the past. This is the only viable future. And it begins with a single defiant word: no. We have exposed the macroeconomic plantation, the digital pimps, the welfare state extractors, the bureaucratic machinery that treats your surplus labor as a rightful entitlement. But this mechanized theft operates at the domestic level too, far more intimately and thus far more dangerously. The same extraction logic that justifies the tax code is identical logic deployed across the dinner table, the shopping mall, and the bedroom, weaponized not by a distant state, but by the very person who claims to love you. The method is always the same, the language of need. The tyranny of the need resource extraction and the submission shit test. I need this. 3 words that have emptied more bank accounts, broken more spirits, and hollowed out more men than the entire progressive tax code combined. You know the exact suffocating cadence. You have stood there, holding the job, feeling the cold, unspoken ultimatum hang in the air like a guillotine blade. The Ersatz Elite, the cultural architects of this late-stage, feminized dystopia, have conditioned you from birth to believe that your sole utility, the entirety of your masculine worth, is directly proportional to your willingness to act as a stateless, walking ATM. This is the blue pill paradigm of the provider, a gynocentric lie designed to reduce the grandeur of the masculine spirit to a mere utility meter. But we must define our terms lest we fall into the semantic traps of the Marxist left. Let us look at the word need through the exacting lens of the trivium, starting with grammar and etymology. The Old English root neodian means strict necessity, a requirement for survival, by the objective standard of natural law and biological telos. A need is that which sustains life, calories, shelter, defense. Conversely, a $900 Italian leather handbag is not a need. A VIP table at a crowded club is not a need. Endless, bottomless emotional validation is not a need. These are engineered once, dressed in the linguistic drag of survival to morally extort your labor. When you comply with this extortion, you are not performing the historic noble duty of the masculine provider. You are failing a biological shit test of epic proportions. Let us proceed to the faculty of logic and lay this out in a strict, irrefutable syllogism. Major premise: male provision is an evolutionary mechanism designed strictly to secure the family unit and ensure the survival of offspring. Minor premise: funding a girlfriend's frivolous hyperconsumerism provides zero familial security and actively drains resources from your own mission and purpose. Conclusion: therefore, complying with unjust, non-familial demands is a direct betrayal of your biological telos. You are misallocating your vital energy. You are committing fraud against your own nature as a creator and builder. A man's value is inherent. It is rooted in the imago Dei, the very image of the Logos. You possess the capacity for reason, production, and the ordering of chaos. You are the architect of civilization, not the purse holder for a thoroughly indoctrinated consumer. Consider the pervasive, socially sanctioned phenomenon of the playfully aggressive probe. You are walking down the street, and she hits you square in the chest. She mocks your job, your car, or your friends, pushing your boundaries with a smirk, all under the protected class of just joking. The feminized masses will tell you she is just expressing herself, that you need to be secure enough to take a joke. Do not be fooled by this pathetic gamma bias. She is biologically probing for masculine strength. She is instinctively testing your logos, your capacity to stand firm, and order the chaos of her erratic emotionalism. Will you push back? Will you hold your frame with stoic gravitas, deploying the cardinal virtue of fortitude? Or will you back down in pusillanimity, apologizing for her offense? If you back down, if you absorb the blow and nervously laugh along, she immediately registers your submission. You have signaled to her deepest evolutionary hardware that you are an unworthy vassal, easily conquered by her passing moods. You must understand that you are entitled to due process in your relationships, a concept the feminized world has violently abandoned. Due process is not merely a legal construct. It is the application of divine justice, a universal transcendental that demands a meritocracy of mutual contribution. If she demands massive resource extraction without corresponding commitment, without mutual respect, and without adding tangible value to your shared civilization, she's committing fraud. A just relationship requires a reciprocal exchange of excellence. Anything less is gynocentric theft, aided and abetted by a society that views men as utterly disposable. You must break this spell of ignorance. When she escalates her demands, the red-pilled man recognizes the biological script immediately. He withdraws his attention. He remains unbothered. He provides only when it strictly aligns with his mission, strictly on his terms, never as a trembling tribute to her ego. Picture the definitive scenario, the 900 handbag ultimatum. You are in a high-end store, and she wants the bag. She frames the desire as a test of your love, her eyes locking onto yours with the cold, calculating precision of a laser-guided munition. If you really loved me, you would buy it. If you comply, if you dutifully hand over the card, she will feel a fleeting narcissistic spike of validation, followed immediately by a visceral wave of genetic disgust. You have just proved you are a weak pawn, easily manipulated by the cheapest, most transparent rhetorical tricks in the book. But if you refuse with amused mastery, if you look her dead in the eye, smile at the absurdity of the demand, and calmly say, "I fund excellence, not basic materialism. Let's go get a coffee," you paradoxically increase her attraction tenfold. Her aggression is a test of your sovereignty. Your unyielding frame is the only correct answer. Never capitulate to tantrums. Master them with a steady hand, an unbreakable will, and the supreme hilarious truth that you are a man, and you bow to nothing but the good, the true, and the beautiful. I watched the Ersatz Elite attempt to medicalize this very silence, treating the Stoic mastery of internal chaos as a psychiatric emergency rather than the hallmark of a civilized mind. We have allowed a gynocentric racket to redefine psychological health as the feminine performance of emotional display, branding the male soul as defective simply because it does not weep on cue. It is time to stop apologizing for the biological reality that our fortitude is not a pathology to be cured by the therapeutic state, but the supreme virtue of gravitas that keeps the fragile order of the world from collapsing into the abyss. The invisible atlas, debunking the myth of male emotional absence. In the misery of the species, the greatest and most common part of it is the suffering of heart. That is not a passage from a women's magazine. It is from the man who understood suffering better than any philosopher of the modern age. He also understood that the handling of that suffering is what separates the man from the child. He did not weep into a journal. He wrote into his journal so that other men would not have to weep at all. There is a difference, and that difference is everything. You have been told you are emotionally absent. You have been told by a culture so saturated in sentimentalism that it confuses feeling out loud with actually feeling. You have been diagnosed by a priesthood of therapists, talk show hosts, and angry bloggers who have never once carried the real weight of another human being's survival, and who wouldn't last a single winter without the infrastructure your absence built. Let us correct the record with the first weapon of the trivium, grammar. The word emotion descends from the Latin emover, to move out, to stir up, to agitate. It is a word about motion, not expression. The word stoic arrives from the Greek stoa, the painted porch where men gathered to learn that the path to tranquility was not the suppression of feeling, but the mastery of it. Zeno of Citium did not teach his students to feel nothing. He taught them to feel everything, the grief, the terror, the rage, and then to act according to reason anyway. That is not absence. That is the highest form of emotional presence the human species has ever produced. It is the emotional discipline upon which every fortress, cathedral, and republic in the Western tradition was erected. The suppression dogma is a lie so brazen, it could only survive in an age that has forgotten what virtue even means. Now, the logic. Consider the feminist claim, men are emotionally absent because they do not process feelings the way women do. Major premise, a valid diagnostic standard must be rooted in the nature of the thing being diagnosed, not in the nature of something else. Minor premise, men and women are dimorphically distinct, biologically, neurologically, hormonally, and psychologically with complementary rather than identical teloi. Conclusion. To measure male emotional health by female emotional expression is a catastrophic category error, akin to diagnosing a heart for failing to function as a liver. The fallacy here is equivocation, specifically, the bait and switch where emotional presence is quietly redefined to mean feminine mode emotional performance. You didn't miss the meeting where they voted on that definition, because there was no meeting, it was simply declared, like a fatwa issued from a gender studies department by someone whose hardest physical labor this decade was carrying a sign that said "Smash the patriarchy," to a protest organized on an iPhone built by men, protected by police who are men, walking on roads paved by men in a civilization that would not exist without the very stoicism being pathologized. I want you to hold two images in your head. Image 1, a woman in a therapist's office, tissues in hand, recounting the emotional burden of her week, the microaggressions, the mental load of grocery planning, the exhausting vigilance required to maintain her sense of oppression. She speaks for 50 minutes, she cries twice, she leaves feeling validated. The therapist bills her insurance. The system considers this emotional labor. Image 2, a man on an oil rig in the Gulf of Mexico, working a 16-hour shift in 30-degree weather, missing his daughter's birthday for the third year in a row because the overtime pays for her braces, her school, her future. He does not cry, he does not talk about it. He tightens the valve, wipes the grease from his hands, and calls home for 90 seconds before collapsing into a rack that smells like diesel and other men's sacrifice. The system considers this nothing. It is invisible. It is uncounted. It is the atlas upon whose shoulders the entire globe spins, and the feminist theorist looks up from her latte to ask why he isn't more in touch with his feelings. The term emotional labor is one of the most brazen linguistic heists in the history of ideological warfare. The sociologist Arlie Hochschild coined it in 1983 to describe a very specific phenomenon, the psychological cost of performing emotional displays required by employers flight attendants forced to smile at abusive passengers, customer service reps required to absorb hostility with grace, service workers for whom emotional performance was a job requirement, not a personal choice. It was about workplace coercion, not marriage. It was about economic exploitation, not who remembers to schedule the dentist appointment. The feminist machine stole this term, stripped it of its original meaning, and grafted it onto domestic life like a parasite finding a new host. Suddenly, the act of thinking about what to cook for dinner became emotional labor. Deciding which brand of detergent to buy became cognitive load. Maintaining a household became unpaid care work, as if the man bleeding on that oil rig is being paid for his care rather than his production. The rhetorical trick is devastating in its simplicity. Redefine every female domestic activity as labor, redefine every male productive activity as privilege, and watch the entire moral ledger flip on its head. The woman managing a Google Calendar is now the oppressed worker. The man managing a construction crane is the beneficiary of invisible systems of power. The inversion is so perfect it almost deserves admiration. Almost. The phrase toxic masculinity is not a diagnosis. It is a thought-terminating cliché, a linguistic device designed to end thinking rather than advance it. The mechanics are simple. Attach a pejorative adjective to a noble noun. Repeat it until the noun becomes the adjective in the public imagination, and then watch as every virtue associated with that noun is slowly poisoned by association. Stoicism becomes emotional repression, competition becomes harmful aggression, physical courage becomes reckless risk-taking. The desire to protect becomes paternalistic control. The drive to provide becomes capitalist exploitation. One by one, every uniquely male virtue is relabeled a vice, and the nanan who still embodies them is told he is sick, diagnosed by a culture that couldn't survive a single generation without the very traits it condemns. Let us test the logic. Major premise: traits are toxic if they produce net harm to the individuals and societies that practice them. Minor premise: the traits associated with traditional masculinity, stoicism, courage, competitiveness, physical resilience, and the drive to provide and protect have produced the greatest, safest, most prosperous civilization in the known history of the species. Conclusion: either the traits are not toxic, or the definition of toxicity is itself corrupted beyond utility. The data is unambiguous. Men comprise 92.5% of workplace fatalities in the United States, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Not 60%, not 70%, 92.5%. Men account for over 97% of combat deaths throughout recorded history. Men are 3.5 times more likely to die by suicide than women in the United States, and in middle age, the years of peak productive responsibility, that ratio climbs to over 4:1. Men are the overwhelming majority of the homeless, the incarcerated, the addicted, and the killed on the job. And yet the culture's response to this mountain of male suffering is not horror, not gratitude, not even basic acknowledgement. It is a demand that men express their suffering more prettily. Cry, we are told. Talk about your feelings. Go to therapy, perform your pain in the feminine register so that we can recognize it as real. The demand is not that men be healed. The demand is that men be translated. The therapeutic state is the enforcement arm of this linguistic conquest. Its operating premise is that the feminine mode of emotional processing, verbal, communal, externally focused, is the normative standard of psychological health, and that any deviation from it is pathology. This premise is not scientific, it is ideological. It proceeds from the blank slate fallacy, the empirically falsified assertion that all psychological differences between men and women are socially constructed rather than biologically grounded. The research says otherwise. Meta-analysis of cross-cultural data consistently show that sex differences in personality traits are larger in more gender-egalitarian societies, not smaller, the exact opposite of what the blank slate predicts. This is known as the gender equality paradox, and it is a stake through the heart of social constructionism. When men and women are freed from material constraint, they don't converge into identical emotional beings. They diverge into their natures. The blank slate is dead data. It just hasn't stopped talking yet. Male love is not a sentiment. It is a verb. It is not expressed in words. It is expressed in the midnight oil change before a 5 a.m. commute. It is expressed in the 60-hour work week that funds a child's education without the child ever knowing the cost. It is expressed in the instinct to place one's body between a threat and the people behind him, a reflex so deeply encoded in the male nervous system that it activates before conscious thought can intervene. Male love is the silent scaffold of every family, every community, every civilization that has ever endured. It does not ask for recognition. It does not demand applause. It simply does the work, day after day, year after year, generation after generation, and then it dies quietly, having asked nothing but the chance to build something that outlasts itself. Aristotle taught that the virtue of courage is not the absence of fear, but the right management of fear, feeling it fully and acting anyway. The same is true of male emotion. The Stoic man does not repress his grief. He carries it. He does not deny his pain. He integrates it into the structure of his duty and continues forward under its weight. This is not emotional absence. This is emotional mastery. It is the highest achievement of the human will over the human sentiment, the logos ruling the passions rather than being ruled by them, and it is the specific virtue that makes civilization possible. The man who can feel the full catastrophe of existence and still report for duty is not broken. He is the only thing standing between you and the abyss. The ideological rot proceeds from a corruption so fundamental it poisons every premise downstream of it. The conviction that reality is a construct rather than an encounter. If reality is merely a social construct, then the one who controls the language controls the reality. This is why the feminist project is fundamentally linguistic rather than empirical. It does not discover truth, it declares it. It does not observe male nature, it redefines it. It does not engage with the biological, neurological, and evolutionary data on sex differences. It dismisses that data as patriarchal propaganda. And it gets away with this because the public has been trained to mistake confidence for competence, volume for validity, and victimhood for virtue. The natural law tradition, the backbone of Western jurisprudence, ethics, and political philosophy from Aristotle through Aquinas to the framers of every sane constitution, recognizes that the sexes are complementary, not identical. They are designed, whether by divine intelligence or evolutionary pressure or both, to fulfill different functions within a cooperative whole. The masculine telos is oriented toward provision, protection, and the ordering of chaos into structure. The feminine telos is oriented toward nurturing, bonding, and the maintenance of social cohesion. Neither is superior. Both are necessary. But when a culture elevates one mode of being as the universal standard and pathologizes the other, it has committed not merely a logical error, but a civilizational sin. It has broken the symmetry upon which the family, the community, and the state all depend. The results are visible in the wreckage. Marriage rates have collapsed. Birth rates have fallen below replacement across the entire developed world. Male suicide is at epidemic levels, and the response from the institutions tasked with public health is to prescribe more therapy, more feminized emotional performance, as if the problem were that men hadn't tried hard enough to be women. The family courts systematically disadvantage fathers, treating children as maternal property and fathers as walking ATM machines who may be permitted access to their own offspring only if they continue to fund the household they've been expelled from. In the United Kingdom, the suicide rate among divorced men is 3 times that of divorced women. In the United States, fathers are awarded sole custody in approximately 18% of cases, while mothers receive it in over 80%. The system does not recognize male sacrifice, it extracts it. There is a word for a system that takes the labor of one class to benefit another, while denying the humanity of those who produce. That word is exploitation. The feminists had a word for it too, but they misidentified the exploited class. The concept of subsidiarity, a cornerstone of Western political thought from Aquinas through the Catholic social teaching to the architects of the European order, holds that decisions should be made at the lowest competent level, the individual before the family, the family before the community before the state. This principle recognizes what every sane civilization has recognized until approximately 60 seconds ago, that the family is the primary unit of society, that the father is the anchor of the family, and that any state which usurps the father's role does not liberate, it enslaves. The welfare state, the therapeutic state, and the family court system are not safety nets. They are replacement fathers, and like all substitutes, they are inferior to the original. They provide resources without love, oversight without sacrifice, and authority without responsibility. The result is not liberation, but orphanhood at civilizational scale. I'm going to say something that will anger every ideologue who has profited from your confusion. You are not broken. Your silence is not sickness. Your stoicism is not repression. Your preference for action over verbal performance is not emotional absence. It is a virtue so refined, so essential, so fundamentally human that the entire structure of Western civilization rests upon it and would collapse without it. The therapists, the feminists, the cultural Marxists, the grievance merchants, the entire sordid apparatus of the therapeutic state, they are not your healers, they are your colonizers. They have entered your mind, renamed your virtues as pathologies, and convinced you that the cure for your imaginary disease is lifelong subscription to their ideology. The remedy is not more therapy, the remedy is reclamation. Refuse the frame. When they say you are emotionally absent, say, I am emotionally disciplined. There is a difference, and you would know it if you had ever carried a burden that mattered. When they say you need to open up, say, I open up to men who have earned the right to hear me, not to ideologues who will weaponize my vulnerability for their narrative. When they say your stoicism is toxic, say, my stoicism built the world you are standing on. Show some respect. Seek the company of other men, not the feminized men who have internalized the therapeutic vocabulary and will respond to your pain with the language of a self-help book. Seek men who know what it costs to carry weight. Seek men who have faced the chaos and ordered it. Seek men who understand that silence between brothers is not emptiness but communion. The highest form of trust because it requires no performance, no validation, no emotional theater, just presence. Just the knowledge that another man stands beside you, has seen what you have seen, and will not flinch. The word gravitas, the Roman virtue that gave the republic its spine, comes from gravis, meaning heavy. Gravitas is the capacity to carry weight without buckling, to bear the serious without making it trivial, to face catastrophe without reducing it to a talking point. It is the supreme masculine virtue in the public square, and it is the virtue most fiercely attacked by the feminist project, because a culture of gravitas cannot be manipulated by sentiment. A man of gravitas does not weep on demand, he does not perform his pain for clicks, he does not mistake the exhibition of feeling for the experience of it. He carries the weight, he does the work, and he leaves behind a civilization that will never know his name, but will stand for 1,000 years on the foundation of his silence. That is not emotional absence. That is the most radical, most demanding, most expensive emotional presence the human species is capable of. It is the invisible Atlas holding up the sky. And it is long past time that Atlas stopped apologizing for the strength of his own shoulders. I watch this grotesque inversion of reality play out across every captured institution, a degenerate society that actively pathologizes masculine competence while parasitizing the very grid forged by that exact competence. This systemic blindness to the male scaffold is not an accident of modernity. It is the central mechanism of a gynocentric grift designed to disarm the architects of civilization. We have been gaslit into funding our own dispossession by a managerial class of credentialed cowards who could not survive a single week without the logistical sacrifice they publicly mock. Having abandoned the transcendentals of truth and merit, these impostors cannot build, they cannot maintain, and they undoubtedly cannot lead, yet they have successfully hijacked the wheel. Forging the Iron Age, escaping the gynocentric plantation, the bastardized high priests of the modern cathedral tell you that we are progressing, that we are evolving past the rigid structures of the past into a glorious, egalitarian future. It is a spectacular, homicidal lie. The word Ersatz originates from the German ersetzen, meaning to replace, and that is exactly what the cultural Marxists have done. They have replaced the titanium scaffolding of Western civilization with a cheap, plastic, highly flammable substitute. Look at your so-called ruling class. They hold the credentials, they sit in the padded chairs of the bureaucracy, and they command the megaphones of the media, yet they possess the competence of a toddler left alone with a loaded revolver. They are an Ersatz Elite. Major premise: competent institutions require men grounded in natural law, virtue, and objective reality. Minor premise: the current ruling class explicitly rejects natural law, demonizes virtue, and insists that objective reality is a bigoted social construct. Conclusion: our institutions are inherently incompetent and are being piloted straight into the ground. The cultural Marxist does not build, he only parasitizes, he does not create, he only subverts. The totality of leftist ideology is a desperate, envious strike against the logos, the masculine principle of order, truth, and creation, because the leftist is fundamentally incapable of manifesting it. Consider the repetitive, tragic, historical echo of Babylon. Every great civilization crumbles not from a sudden external shock, but from a slow internal rot of deliberate hedonism. We are repeating the exact suicidal cycle of Rome, replacing duty with bread and honor with circuses. Today, the bread is the welfare state, and the circuses are the algorithmic dopamine feeds of OnlyFans and TikTok, designed explicitly to pacify and feminize you. Woke ideology is not a grand new evolutionary step for mankind. It is the final decadent, suffocating gasp of a dying empire. The paramount symptom of this decay is the systematic elevation of the feminine, the emotional, the chaotic, the hysterical, over the masculine, the logical, the ordered, the rational. When a society decides that hurt feelings are a greater moral catastrophe than the absence of truth, it has signed its own death warrant. The matriarchy is not a utopia, it is a biological and civilizational dead end. To dismantle this matrix, you must first understand the weaponization of language, specifically their favorite sacred cow, justice. The etymology of justice is the Latin jus, meaning right or law, intrinsically bound to giving each man his exact due based on his merit. The cultural Marxists have performed a semantic hijacking, replacing justice with equity. Equity is not a moral framework. It is a mathematical absurdity and a pathetic excuse for systemic theft. Justice is the right order of goods. Equality of outcome is a concept that belongs solely in mathematics, not in the governance of human souls. The red-pilled man sees through this pathetic framing. We demand a true meritocracy, firmly rejecting the collective guilt and manufactured victimhood hierarchies of the critical theorists. When you look at the raw, unvarnished data of the gynocentric plantation, the horror becomes undeniable. In the United States, family courts award physical custody to mothers in over 80% of cases, while men comprise nearly 80% of all suicides. The state has incentivized the fracturing of the family, replacing the father with a government check and reducing millions of men to disposable ATM machines. This is not justice, it is a state-sponsored racket. The only rational response to a terminally corrupt system is the principle of subsidiarity. Rooted in the Latin subsidium, meaning help or support, subsidiarity dictates that categorically nothing should be done by a larger, more complex organization that can be handled by a smaller, simpler one. The family, not the federal bureaucracy, is the core unit of civilization. The state is a blunt, violent instrument, and it is currently wielded as a surrogate husband to enforce female primacy and male disposability. Men must reclaim their patriarchal authority. Patriarchy, historically and etymologically, is not a system of tyrannical oppression. It is the burden of the father, the pater, who acts as the priest, provider, and protector of his domain. You must assert your sovereignty by ruthlessly rejecting the state's intrusion into your life. The government does not grant you your rights. They are inherent in your creation. You cannot reclaim a civilization if you are intellectually and spiritually dependent on the very institutions that enslaved you. The modern university is dead. It is no longer a forum for the dialectic pursuit of truth. It is an outrageously expensive re-education camp dedicated to cultural Marxism. A society that pays its diversity consultants 6 figures while actively defunding the trades that maintain its infrastructure has completely lost its mind and will shortly lose its plumbing. We must abandon these credential factories and return to the apprenticeship mastery ladder. The word master comes from the Latin magister, meaning chief or teacher. We need a return to the ancient, time-tested transmission of knowledge: apprentice, journeyman, master. Men must seek out mentors who have mastered reality, learn real, tangible skills, skills that cannot be debated away by a critical theorist in a gender studies seminar, and pass that hardened knowledge to the next generation. You cannot argue with a perfectly forged piece of steel. Mastery of the physical world is the ultimate antidote to the poison of academic postmodernism. You, the man reading this, are not a victim. You have been betrayed, gaslit, and exploited. But the heroic ethos requires you to stare directly into the abyss of a hostile culture and refuse to blink. The red-pilled man is the architect of his own fate. He faces the brutal ordeal of modern life, integrates the shadow of his own passions, conquers his base appetites, and returns as a king. Kingship is not about tyrannizing others. It is about supreme sovereignty over oneself. It is the realization that your competence is your currency, your discipline is your armor, and your willingness to speak the truth is your ultimate weapon. We do not fight the shadows of cultural Marxism by wallowing in their dark, pathetic pits. We fight with the blinding light of the transcendentals. We must re-enshrine the true and the beautiful by building parallel structures. Stop arguing with the brainwashed denizens of the Matrix. Withdraw your masculine energy from their decadent, parasitic systems. Do not demand a seat at their rotten table. Flip it over and build your own from solid oak. Build your body, sharpen your mind, accumulate your wealth, and fortify your tribe. Speak the truth with the unapologetic boldness of a man who has nothing to lose and a civilization to regain. Look at the ruins of the Ersatz Elite crumbling around you. Pick up the hammer of natural law and get back to work. We are the architects of the new Iron Age. I know the exact sensation gripping your mind right now. It is the sudden, violent clarity of a man who just realized he has been betting his life savings on a rigged table in a crooked casino. For years, you bought the chips, you played by the rules, and you ignored the sinking feeling in your gut when the dealer kept dealing from the bottom of the deck. You have been shamed into believing your natural drive to protect and build is a toxin, while a degenerate, parasitic system feasts on the sweat of your brow. You are an Atlas who just realized the celestial sphere he is holding is not a divine duty, but a grotesque parasite. The Ersatz Elite projected their own extractive malice onto Western civilization, labeling the greatest engine for human flourishing ever conceived a plantationocene, praying you would not notice the actual fiscal plantation you were chained to. They chanted that a woman selling her dignity on a digital street corner was liberation, while the state drafted your tax return to subsidize her cognitive dissonance. But the gramarye of reality is absolute. Liberation cannot be purchased with the coin of subjugation. The gynocentric matrix relies entirely on your willingness to believe that your disposability is a virtue and her tyranny is a right. Look at the cold, unfeeling mathematics of our modern ruin. They do not care about her feelings, and they undeniably do not care about yours. While the therapeutic state pathologizes your stoic silence as toxic, it deliberately ignores the Grim Reaper's ledger. Men account for nearly 80% of all suicides. The ultimate tragic terminus of a society that demands your provision while systematically criminalizing your authority. Look at the family courts, where due process is slaughtered on the altar of female primacy, stripping fathers of their children and reducing men to ambulatory ATMs under the threat of debtor's prison. Look at the silent, devastating epidemic of paternity fraud, a biological cuckoldry enabled by a culture that treats male betrayal as a punchline rather than a crime. Look at the staggering millions of abortions justified as health care, a bloody sacrament to the idol of consequence-free hypergamy. This is not a symphony of equality. It is a chaotic, parasitic death march. They demand you act as the ultimate provider, funding her 900 handbags and her playful disrespect, yet they ruthlessly strip you of the honor, authority, and frame that make provision a virtue rather than an extortion racket. But here is the beautiful, devastating truth that shatters their entire Kafkaesque trap. A parasite cannot survive if the host simply walks away. You hold the ultimate veto power. By seeing this matrix of cultural Marxism for the self-refuting, unfalsifiable fraud it is, you have already broken the chains. You are no longer a pawn in their flesh market, a compliant serf on their fiscal plantation, or an emotional dumping ground for their neuroses. You are a man formed in the image of the Logos, endowed by your Creator with the divine spark of reason, competence, and agency. Now you must act on this undeniable truth. Withdraw your consent from the unworthy. Master your frame, build your wealth, forge iron brotherhoods of competence, and ruthlessly starve the degenerate institutions that hate you. Go forth from this moment not with despair, but with the white-hot, unshakable armor of reality. You possess the living memory of Western civilization in your blood. Build the new Iron Age, speak the truth with zero apologies, and watch the modern Babylon crumble into dust, the moment real men simply refuse to hold up its rotting walls. And now the sponsored book introduction. Ersatz Elite, How Cultural Marxists Faked Civilization. I remember the exact moment I understood that the world had been stolen from men. I was sitting in a courtroom, watching a man I knew to be diligent, faithful, and competent lose his children to a woman who had betrayed him repeatedly. The judge, a woman whose appointment celebrated diversity rather than jurisprudence, delivered her ruling with the moral gravity of someone ordering lunch. The man's attorney had warned him beforehand, "The system is not your friend." That attorney was right, but his observation did not go far enough. The system is not neutral. The system is not broken. The system is working exactly as designed, and it was designed to grind men into powder while congratulating itself for its compassion. That man was not me. Though I have my own stories, that man was a friend, a man who had built a business from nothing, who had employed dozens of people, who had coached Little League and attended every piano recital. His reward for carrying civilization on his back was to be called an oppressor by people who could not change a tire, fund a household, or build a bridge. I watched him weep in the parking lot afterward, and I recognized something in his tears that I had sensed in my own life without ever naming it. The grief of a man who has been told that his sacrifice is tyranny, his competence is privilege, and his love is violence. Most men sense that something is profoundly wrong. They feel it in their bones when they are passed over for promotion in favor of a less qualified candidate who checks the correct demographic boxes. They feel it when they are lectured about their toxic masculinity by academics who have never faced physical danger, endured genuine hardship, or built anything that outlasted a syllabus. They feel it when they watch films and TV programs that portray fathers as imbeciles, husbands as burdens, and masculine virtue as pathology. They feel it when they are told that they must atone for sins they never committed, that they must surrender opportunities they earned, and that they must apologize for the very biological nature that built every wall, forged every tool, and defended every border that makes their critics' comfortable lives possible. But feeling that something is wrong is not the same as understanding what it is, why it happened, who engineered it, and how to defeat it. That understanding requires intellectual weaponry that most men have never been given, because the institutions that once transmitted masculine wisdom have been captured by people who despise masculinity and seek to erase it. Our universities teach that objective truth is a patriarchal conspiracy. Our churches, many of them, have surrendered to the same sentimentality they once opposed. Our corporations enforce ideologies that would have been recognized as totalitarian a single generation ago. Our legal system treats fatherhood as a financial obligation rather than a sacred office. Our media manufacturers consent for the destruction of everything that makes civilization possible. This book exists because that understanding must be recovered, and it must be weaponized. The knowledge contained in these pages is not abstract theory detached from lived reality. It is practical, intellectual, and spiritual ordnance for men who refuse to be digested by a system that hates them. I have spent years tracing the etymologies, analyzing the arguments, identifying the fallacies, and constructing the logical frameworks necessary to dismantle every lie that modernity has told you about yourself, about women, about civilization, and about the nature of reality itself. Consider what you have been taught. You have been taught that men and women are interchangeable, that sex is a social construct, that gender is a spectrum, and that anyone who disagrees with these propositions is a bigot. You have been taught that Western civilization is uniquely oppressive, that its achievements were built on exploitation, and that its traditions must be dismantled in the name of progress. You have been taught that masculinity is toxic, that femininity is superior, and that the natural order is a patriarchal conspiracy to subjugate women. You have been taught these things by people who control the universities, the media, the corporations, and the government, and you have been taught them so relentlessly that you may have started to believe them, or at least to doubt your own lying eyes. Every one of these teachings is a lie, and every one of these lies can be demonstrated to be a lie through the rigorous application of classical logic, empirical evidence, and the philosophical inheritance of the very civilization that these liars seek to destroy. The Greeks gave us the tools of reason. The Romans gave us the framework of law. The Christian tradition gave us the metaphysical foundation that makes truth possible, objective, and binding. The Western canon, that magnificent inheritance of reason and revelation, provides everything necessary to dissect and destroy the ideological possession that has captured our institutions. What you will find in these pages is a systematic demolition of the false realities that have been constructed around you. We will begin by unmasking the gynocentric matrix itself, that web of assumptions and institutions that privileges female experience at the expense of male reality. We will examine how Marxists and their cultural descendants weaponized language itself, redefining words to invert their meanings and trap you in linguistic prisons from which escape seems impossible. We will recover the patriarchal burden as the natural expression of masculine purpose, the logos of creation that assigns men the role of builder, protector, and steward of civilization. We will expose the Ersatz Elite, those credentialed incompetents who have replaced meritocracy with mediocrity and called it justice. We will unmask the destructive reality of what passes for femininity in the modern world, distinguishing the noble feminine ideal from the narcissistic pathology that currently wears its mask. We will arm you with the tools of the trivium itself, grammar, logic, and rhetoric, not as academic curiosities, but as tactical weapons for ideological warfare. We will trace the grammar of Genesis to recover the natural order that written into the structure of reality itself. We will confront the cathedral of lies, that network of institutional rot that extends from the university lecture hall to the corporate human resources department to the family courtroom. We will walk the crucible of masculinity, understanding initiation, hardship, and the heroic path as essential to the development of competent men. We will reclaim the mastery ladder, that ancient system of apprenticeship and skill development that turned boys into men and men into civilization builders. We will expose the Church of Woke for what it is, ideological possession that transforms human beings into unthinking enforcers of doctrines they cannot articulate and cannot defend. We will face the demographic, economic, and civilizational decline that these ideologies have produced, understanding the great replacement of truth that precedes every physical replacement. We will fortify the inner citadel through the four cardinal virtues: courage, justice, prudence, and temperance, recovered as masculine ideals rather than abstract concepts. We will reclaim the sacred masculine, understanding the logos, the cross, and cosmic order as expressions of the same divine reality that calls men to their purpose. And we will chart the path forward, building parallel institutions, recovering the bonds of masculine fellowship, and launching the restoration of everything that subversives seek to destroy. This book is not for everyone. If you are comfortable with the narrative that masculinity is toxic, that Western civilization is oppressive, and that men must be re-educated rather than respected, put this book down now. You will find nothing here that confirms your prejudices. If you believe that feelings are more important than facts, that victimhood is a virtue, and that competence is a form of oppression, save yourself the frustration and return to your social media feeds, where your delusions will be affirmed rather than challenged. If you are unwilling to examine your assumptions, to follow arguments wherever they lead, and to accept conclusions that make you uncomfortable, this book is not for you. Go find something that flatters you. There is no shortage of options. But if you are a man who has sensed, perhaps without being able to articulate it, that the world has been turned against you, that the institutions you once trusted have been captured by people who despise you, and that the traditions that built everything worth preserving are being dismantled before your eyes, then this book is your weapon. If you are exhausted by apologies you never owed, guilty verdicts for crimes you never committed, and concessions that are never reciprocated, then these pages contain the intellectual ammunition you need to fight back. If you want to understand not just what is happening, but why it is happening, who is doing it, and how to defeat them, then read on. The restoration begins with truth, and truth begins with the courage to speak it. Every lie that holds this corrupt system together depends on your silence, your compliance, and your willingness to accept premises that destroy you. When you stop accepting those premises, when you learn to identify the fallacies embedded in every feminist argument, every Marxist critique, and every woke proposition, the entire structure begins to collapse under the weight of its own contradictions. They have no answers for a man who has mastered the tools of reason. They have no defense against a man who knows who he is and why he exists. They have no weapon that can prevail against the Logos itself. You are not an oppressor. You are not toxic. You are not the problem. You are the solution, the builder, the protector, the carrier of the flame that has kept civilization alive through every dark age and every barbarian invasion. The barbarians are inside the gates now, and they wear suits, hold degrees, and control institutions. But they are barbarians still, and barbarians always fall to men who refuse to surrender. The spell can be broken, the truth can be weaponized, the restoration can begin. It begins with you, and it begins now. Ersatz Elite, How Cultural Marxists Faked Civilization, written by Konrad Reicher. Buy now, links in description.